So in today's episode, I want to start sorting the paint on this ex-police Skoda Octavia vRS. But before I can do that, I want to start rebuilding all the intercooler pipework and intercooler which are painted in the previous episode. And I also want to sort the exhaust out because at the minute it's got a decap pipe and I want to fit a cat so this can pass an MOT once again. So I start by removing the decap pipe and cutting a section out. Now this is the new 3-inch 400 cell sports cat. Now I don't know if it's going to be any good. It was £30 off eBay, but I thought it was worth a shot and it looks okay. Now funny enough, the outside diameter of the old exhaust is the same as the inside diameter of the new cat, so I can just make this slot straight on. So I clean everything up with the wire wheel and make sure everything's nice and clean. So I make a little insert which slots it all together so I can start TIG welding it. Now as I've said before, I am no TIG welder. I really don't know what I'm doing. I do try my best, but the outcome's never fantastic. So please don't mock me. If you do know how to TIG welding, you want to give me some lessons, I'm happy to pay for them. Please let me know in the comments. I'll be very grateful. Anyway, back to the job in hand. So I fully glued the two pieces together. Not the best, like I said, but it does work. And it's probably prettier than my MIG welding, but hey ho. And then bolt it on the car so I can see exactly where the original exhaust needs cutting. I mark it, then cut it with a 4.5-inch grinder with 1mm disc. Once it's cut, I can mark where the post lambda sensor needs to go. And I think just here looks spot on. And then take it back off, drill the hole, and again, glue the two pieces together. I have been told I've got way too much heat into this, but it was only working at 40 amps. So who knows? You know, help me. And then slot the end so I can put a clamp over it, put it all back together, and that's it. So I've done as much as I can with this cat for now. I've got the new sensor coming. The old one, as you can see here, is in a really bad condition. The threads are all knackered. The sealing washer is not very good. It's dinted. It might work, but I don't want to risk it. So I've got a new one coming. A Lucas one. It was about 35 quid. Can't grumble. Got a new gasket coming because I don't want to risk it. So yeah, before the end of the video, I'll get that all boxed up. But for now, we're going to move on to the next thing. Another little thing. I've just had these wheels back from powder coating. In the last episode, I sent them off. They were pretty pitted, corroded. Not the best. These are OZ Super Turismo from what I can gather. Quite a nice, quite a rare wheel, worth quite a lot of money. They're 18-inch and I think they really look good. They were black, they're now silver with a really deep sparkle to them. So I'm really pleased with them and this is going to really help set the car off. Onto the front mount. So I start by putting the silicone hoses on the end and then carefully put all the boost pipes. Now this takes a while because I need to remember which order they go in. It's not that clear, but luckily the advantage I do have is because I film everything, I can look back at the videos. So put the top hat on, intercooler on the front, and then I start putting the side pipes on. And that's when I come across the first problem. If you ever look at a police car, fire engine or ambulance, when the lights are on, you'll notice the headlights flash with the blue lights. Now they are wired into a diode. And if you look here, this is where the diode would have been wired up and it's been connected back. So the white wire's been extended. It looks a mess. It's not up to my standards, so I'm going to cut it out and then put it back to how it would have been standard. So basically what the diode would have done is it acts as a one-way valve and stops the voltage going back up that headlight line, allowing the headlights to flash without anything else happening. So I solder everything back together, put some heat shrink on it, and then wrap it in tester tape so it looks factory again. And that's done. Don't it look better? Back to the turbo hoses. I fit the 45-degree for the inlet manifold onto the map sensor housing, and then the next selection of parts which go into the offside of the intercooler. Now these clips are good, but I don't like how long the threads are, so I cut them down afterwards and file them up. A little bit of OCD coming out of me. And once everything's positioned, I just go around with a ratchet and make sure everything's nice and tight so no hoses pop off. So that's all the boost pipes fitted, intercooler fitted. Obviously I painted the slam panel in the last video, I did the air intake in the last video. Just looking at a lot better now. I'm really pleased with it. It looks much better than it did before. So I think the next job is to tidy the garage up because it's an absolute mess and I'm going to continue doing the bodywork. So as it's a beautifully hot sunny day, I thought I'd do some work outside. So this bonnet, I was just going to paint the front edge, but I've decided to do the whole thing. Now it is quite rusty across the front lip, as you can see. A lot of it's stone chips, nothing I'm overly concerned about. So I'm going to set to with a DA sander, some 320 pads, followed by 600 pads, and just see what I can do with it. Might need a little bit of filler here and there, but we're just going to have a play. Now these are 320 Abranet pads. It's not normal sandpaper, it's more like a mesh. They're really good, they don't clog up, they last a lot longer than normal paper, so I would highly recommend these. They're not the cheapest, but it's worth getting. They're made by Merca. So start using the 320 grit on the DA, however it is slow work and there's a lot of stone chips in this bonnet. So I quickly move on to some 80 grit, which is a little bit coarse, however it does the job nicely. There is a little dint there which I later fill with dolphin glaze, but it's only very minor. So once I do the whole thing in 80 grit, I then move on to 240 grit, followed by 320 grit, and then 600 grit, so I make it nice and smooth, nice and fine, and that looks a lot better already. Next up, I use some of this U-Pole spot repair primer. Now this is perfect for blowing stuff like this in, because obviously you can't put the gloss paint direct on bare metal, but this primer just acts as a bit of a key between and does the job perfectly and doesn't tend to react like other primers do. That's the bonnet done for now. Let's move on to something else. So excuse the state of the garage floor, but the new gaskets arrived. There's the old one and there's the new one, eBay special. We've got the new Lucas lambda sensor, which is basically the same. It's a pattern part, but it's a Lucas one, so it should be pretty good quality. I'm going to fit them to that. So this is a really simple, straightforward job. So it's literally two M8 bolts through the flange, sandwiching the gasket, and then a 22mm spanner to put the lamp sensor in. And it's just a case of clipping everything up with some cable ties. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. So I haven't done any filming for a couple of weeks. I've just been on holiday and I've just been super busy, so I've not had time. So this video has been about 4 weeks in the making. And bearing in mind I do a weekly video, so you can imagine how much effort I put into these videos. So if you haven't already, just hit that subscribe button. So the plan now is I'm going to stick the wheels on this side. I'm going to drop the car down, pull it out, bring all the body panels in and finish prepping them and then get them painted inside the garage so I'll get a much better finish. Right, so I'm quickly fitting the wheels, but what I am doing is I'm winding the bolts in, tightening them up, and then winding them back out, and doing that a few times, just because these have just been freshly powder coated, and the seats have got a little bit of powder coat on where the tapers of the wheel bolts would fit. So just to avoid any issues in the future, I'm just doing it a few times just to break that off. So I actually forgot how low this car was, so it looks kind of funny now it's back on the floor. Anyway, off camera, I've just painted the bonnet prop green, which I know is a little bit sad, but it's the same colour as the calipers, and I thought it'd tie it together a little bit. Plus, it was quite rusty and let it down. So I'm going to put this back on. And look at that. Bay is looking a lot better now. So the front of the intercooler just scraped going out of the garage, and it's never done that before. So I've had a quick look at my old videos, and I've discovered I've done something wrong. I've actually fitted this incorrectly. So these L-shaped brackets here, I've put on upside down, so the intercooler is too low. So once it's back in the garage, I need to remove these, turn them around, lift the intercooler up, and realign the hoses. Oops. So now the garage is clear, it's time to start work on these panels, and we're going to start with this front bumper. Now, as you can see, this has been badly cut out for the intercooler and the boost pipes. So I think we can do better than this. So we're going to start by cleaning these bits up. So what I'm going to do, I'm basically going to draw a straight edge on this bumper and then use a 1mm cutting disc on the grinder to reshape it. Now I find the grinder works really well for cutting plastic and it's actually quite easy to do. So now I've done this side, it's time to move on to the other side. Again, exactly the same on the other side, just take my time, cutting bits off till I get it nice and square. Once that's done, I move on to the centre. Now the centre is not too bad, but we can make it better. So now the rough shape's all done, I'm going to move on to some 80 grit Abranet cloth on a block. Now the reason I'm using a block is to ensure I do a nice square finish. So this is basically remove any high spots, remove any loose material, and get rid of all like the burrs and all the little bits we don't want. And as you can see, it's done a good job and looks a lot better. Now onto the other side, repeat the process. And finally I do the centre in exactly the same way. Now there is a little crack in the corner of this. Now obviously the bumper's a lot thinner here than it was originally, hence why it's cracked. It's obviously like a stress crack. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to V this out a little bit. I'm going to drill the end. I'm going to use a bit of off-cut plastic to plastic weld it in. Now this is a really easy job, and to be fair, anyone can do this. Not a lot of skill required. So to start off with, you need to V it out. So you can use anything for this, but I'm using the grinder, remove the paint, and I'm going to drill the end to stop the crack from getting any worse. Once that's done, I'm going to use a soldering iron. I can pick these up for about 10 quid and simply just melt the plastic into each other. Now you need the right type of plastic. This is polypropylene. It says on the back of the bumper, it says PP on it. That's how you know. Which is very easy to work with, very easy to use. and you can shape it easily and do what you want with it basically. So I'm literally using this as like a filler rod, melting the two together, and once it's done and I'm happy with it, I get a heat gun and a flat blade palette knife type thing, heat it up, and then I can shape it, make it nice and flat. Now the beauty of this polypropylene is once all that's done, you can sand it down nicely. It's very, very workable. So once it's done, I can just sand it down with a block, get it to the right shape. Then I'm using proper plastic bumper filler. This is designed to go on polypropylene bumpers, and it works really well. You mix it just the same as you would normal filler. Right, so the filler's now dry. I'm going to use some 180 and start blocking this down. It might be a little bit too fine, but I'm just going to be careful because I don't want to scratch plastic too much. So I'm going to start with this. If it is too fine, I'll go on to coarser. So from experience, the only way to sand filler is to use a sanding block with some coarse grit, something like an 80 grit or a 120 grit, and then work your way down to something like a 320 grit. Now, if you try and use a sander or anything else, I don't find it shapes properly. I tend to find that the edges taper off and it just never looks right. So doing it this way is the way professionals do it. Yes, it is labour intensive. Yes, it will get hot and sweaty, but you will get the best finish. So once all the filler is shaped, I can then move on to the sander. Now I use some 320 just to get rid of some of the stone chips, and then I'm moving way up to 600 grit just to key the whole bumper and make it nice, ready for primer. So for any bits that have gone through to bare plastic, I use some plastic adhesive primer followed by some edge primer. So while that primer's drying, I'm going to move on to the spoiler. Now I think it's just white primer on it at the minute. It's really coarse, so I'm just going to start Scotch-Briting it and see what it looks like. I think that's what it's going to need, and that's ready for paint. So I'm using warm soapy water with this. Now the reason I'm doing that is it keeps the dust down, and also the soap element cleans the product. So this has got quite a lot of tree sap on it, so the hot soapy water is going to help get rid of that. Stops the Scotch-Brite blocking up and stops it being dusty. Now this did not go to plan. The idea was just to key it up with some Scotch-Brite, as I just mentioned. However, for some reason, the paint was on it is not sticking at all to the spoiler, so it's just peeling off. So I'm having to sand it all off with some 320 sandpaper. How annoying. Now that was a nightmare. The spoiler's now all prepped, however it wasn't an easy job. So I think what's happened is someone's painted the spoiler in buff primer. It probably arrived like that from the manufacturer. And then whoever painted it has just decided it didn't need any prep, have just painted straight on top. So hardly any of the white paint is stuck. So on the top and the bottom, none of the white paint is stuck. The sides it has for some reason. I don't know why that is. So I've had to basically sand it all off and start again. So I've had to go 320, 600, wet and dry. And yeah, it's good now. But yeah, it took me at least an hour to do that, which is an absolute pain because I was hoping it just needed a quick Scotch-Brite. But anyway, next job, back to the bumper. Let's get that Scotch-Brited. So again, I'm using the grey Scotch-Brite with hot soapy water. Now I think, from memory, the grey Scotch-Brite is the equivalent of a 600 wet and dry paper. I think the red is 320, but don't hold me to that. I just know the grey's a bit finer and the red's a bit coarser. So this Scotch-Brite stuff is absolutely fantastic for getting in the nooks and crannies. Really good, highly recommend. If you haven't got any and you do bodywork, buy some. Right, next onto the bonnet. Again, this is pretty much done now, so it just wants wet and dry. So I'm just using some 600 wet and dry and fading all the spot repairs out, making sure the whole thing's got a good key. And the last thing prep-wise to do is the wings. Now I've bought a new second-hand black wing for the driver's side. Is that the driver's? Yeah. And the passenger side I'm going to repair. I've already put some filler in previously. They've both got a little bit of rust on the bottom. It's not the end of the world. Yes, it is a bit of a bodge painting over it. I'll sand the best of it out I can. However, these wings are quite scarce now. I don't want to spend loads of money on a car. And as I've said a million times, this is like a sympathetic restoration and not a full-blown restoration. So it's going to look a lot better and it's going to give it a bit more life to the car. Fingers crossed. Right, this is exactly the same process as everything else. This time, I just make sure I smash that subscribe button because it's completely free and it really helps the channel to grow. So if you do like my videos, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment. Thanks, guys. Right, back onto shaping yet more filler. So again, using the sanding block, I'm using some 80 grit, and I follow it with 180 grit, 320, and once I'm happy with all that, go over the whole thing with some 600 wet and dry on the DA, And that is pretty much that. So everything's now sanded and we are pretty much ready for paint. I just want to go over the whole lot now with some panel wipers to make sure it's all nice and clean. And then we can start putting the paint on. So today we're going to be using the base coat and lacquer. So the base coat's like a matte finish and the lacquer gives it the shine. Right, into time lapse. So clean everything down and fire up the spray gun. And this is where things start going a little bit wrong for me. Now I've bought cheap base coat and it's crap. Don't recommend it. Such is life. So that was a complete nightmare. So let me explain. I bought cheap white base coat paint and I shouldn't have done. Base coat is a paint you mix 50-50 with thinners. And from experience, cheap paint's not great. And I'm not very good with base coat because it's such a high thinner content, it does tend to react a lot more. So what's happened, I will show you. So areas like here at the bottom of the bumper, where I faded some of the paint in, I put it on a little bit heavy, it's ran, it's sagged. Paint's coloured really bad, so it's needed loads and loads of coats. So I haven't got enough paint to do everything anyway. But this front bumper's not too bad other than that bit at the bottom. So the issues start with stuff like the bonnet. Now it was covering terribly, so this has had like 10 coats. And basically I've put it on a bit too thick and it's sagged there and it's ran there badly. So this is dry now, but it's not very good. It's just really poor, coloured terrible. So yeah, that needs sanding back and doing again. As you can see, it's still a bit light there. Hey ho. This wing didn't go too bad. However, for some reason, we've got some random bits of crap here. Like fish eyes or something. I don't know what's happened, but hey ho. This wing, I forgot to put the primer on, so I couldn't do that. And most annoyingly, the spoiler, that was going fairly well. But the bits which were white, which I left because they seemed to adhere okay, this base coat has reacted with really badly. So it's just ran down like this straight away. Just literally instantly, like you can just see there, just like rippled. And it's gone terribly. So, what's the solution, eh? Well, I've had enough. I've been about 5 hours on this today and I've not really got anywhere. I mean, we haven't made a step forward, but we've kind of made half a step back. So, it is what it is. I've nearly ran out of thinners. So I couldn't finish it anyway, even if I had enough base coat. Again, a rookie mistake. So what I've done, I've bought some better direct gloss paint. So that is like a 2K paint where you mix hardener in it. You're going to put a small percentage of thinners in. It tends to cover a lot better. I find it's easier to use and I just find it better. And for a normal gloss white like this, that's all you need. So I bought some of that. I bought some more thinners and I think we're going to reattempt all this in the next week or so because this video is long enough. I'm disappointed because I wanted the car kind of built back up in this video. But these things happen, annoyingly, what you do. So, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, like and comment, and stay tuned for more. See you later, bye bye.